Since I've talked about WrestleMania 35 last week and WrestleMania 40 is happening this weekend, I'm still in the wrestling mood, and what a perfect candidate to have this edition of Loud House vs. Casagrandes project to be all about wrestling. Can't Lynn them all from the Loud House and saving face from the Casagrandes. When I first saw the synopsis of Can't Lynn them all, then I honestly felt relief that there was an episode involving wrestling that has the same elements as the Casagrandes episode Saving Face. But at the same time, after watching the Loud House episode, it kind of shows that Mexican wrestling, despite what you feel if it's better than wrestling of where Lynn lives, at the same time, it has a better plot when it comes to a wrestler in comparison to Lynn, who ends up becoming a wrestler. In the Loud House episode, after the wrestler who finished his match called the audience a chicken, which Lynn is part of the audience, it infuriates her to the point that she jumps into the ring and takes down the opponent who won, which honestly impressed so many fans that Bella Big Bucks wants Lynn to be part of her wrestling league, which in order to do so, she needs to have a character of her own in wrestling, so Lynn calls herself the Brawl Monitor. In all honesty, a really good nickname for a character like Lynn, but at the same time, this is where the good qualities mostly end. But let's get into the Casagrandes episode. Carlos has tickets for him and the kids to watch wrestling for, well, La Tormenta is gonna compete, which people are talking about since that she is the best wrestler in Mexican wrestling. But Ryan and Sid saw Blanca, who is doing the same moves and speed as La Tormenta, which they think is the same person as La Tormenta. Now, to tell you the truth, when I first watched this episode for the first time, I was familiar with the whole Sin Cara storyline back in 2011 when it comes to the old Sin Cara and the new Sin Cara when it comes to the rivalry that centers around Mexico when it comes to Maxes. And to tell you the truth, if anyone doesn't understand what this episode is trying to do, you should probably check out the Sin Cara vs. Sin Cara rivalry just to understand the importance of Mexican Maxes when it comes to Mexican culture and wrestling. Believe me when I say this is literally the only element that you need to understand when it comes to the meaning of saving face. I'm gonna be real with you guys, like completely real with you. I really understand what the Loud House episode is trying to do when it comes to having the haters hate on you for the wrong reasons that you're causing, all the while learning that you should do what's really best for you in order to make yourself feel good when it comes to not doing the same thing that you've been doing in every single wrestling event. But at the same time, with this being a Lynn episode, in all honesty, it really feels like that with this episode, she honestly doesn't even care whatsoever of what she needs to learn in comparison to the other Loud Sisters. Like, as much as how annoying the Loud Sisters constantly have to revert back to their old ways and learn the same lessons again, at the very least, they at least try to make us feel sympathetic towards them. Well, aside from force of habits. And when it comes to this episode, it really feels like that episode from season 2, well, Lynn just didn't learn anything about not winning every single time, that winning doesn't mean everything, then I can guarantee you that she's experiencing this, but in front of a crowd that instantly puts their foot down and would mostly be the definition of the internet wrestling community, but at the same time, this is mainly the minor leagues. At this point, I can justify Lynn qualifying in Wrestling League despite being underage in comparison to the other wrestlers who are adults, but at the same time, considering that she's into winning all the time, all the while that most of the montages that centers around the character doing things in order to get the objective done faster. With this, it really feels like that this is mainly a way of Lynn learning on winning isn't the answer to everything, but at the same time, it really feels like that she can't be able to experience that lesson, knowing full well that this episode itself isn't really giving Lynn's character any serious development. Believe me, when an episode centers around the same elements from the Season 2 episode while Lynn was playing a board game with the other Loud siblings, it really feels like Lynn can't be able to handle any feedback from the crowd. And considering that she plays soccer at school, the difference is that she's at a wrestling event with people that are probably from different locations and not the same people from school, which kind of makes sense. But considering that most of the students and even the teachers even assaulted Lynn, I can't even tell if this episode is showcasing that Lynn should learn a lesson on not being a heel too much and winning every single time, or the fact that this is mainly just showcasing that Bella Big Bucks just wants to have something different from a wrestler that can increase her ratings when it comes to wrestling events, which for me personally, I find it difficult to see her as the antagonist because she's just doing her job. Even Vince McMahon would do something like this in the Attitude Era. When it comes to the Casagrandes episode, it really focuses on the wrestlers Max being the true power, and when it comes to Ryan and Sid, to tell you the truth, everyone at that age would go through so much just to see the person's personal belongings, especially when it comes to the wrestling attire itself. And to tell you the truth, Blanca, who is the wrestler in all this, to tell you the truth for how Ryan and Sid are so invested in the fact that they actually found La Tormenta, but not in her wrestling gear, kind of shows that they're really desperate to see the Max itself. And considering that they lost the Max and they need Frida to make the Max in order to have La Tormenta to perform in the ring, even though that she performs poorly due to her not having a real mask, proves onto why Saving Face is one of my favorite episodes from Season 2 of the Casagrandes. Trust me when I say this, even though it's weird to see La Tormenta being in this position, but to tell you the truth, like I said, you should check out the Sin Cara vs. Sin Cara rivalry, and even though that it has nothing to do of what Bianca is doing in this episode, at the same time, it showcases the culture of Maxes in wrestling, in Mexican wrestling. Believe me when I say this, is that for someone who watches WWE and notices these methods, even though that they're different from each other, at the same time, Mexican culture when it comes to wrestling, there are always different cultures when it comes to wrestling, either in Mexico, Japan, and other countries. In all honesty, I would have give Lynn Namar the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the other wrestlers that Lynn is facing are cartoon characters, which is a homage of what WWE was in the 80s and 90s, but to tell you the truth, the problem centering around the Loud Toss episodes honestly makes the wrestlers in this probably an obstacle for Lynn to go through. And even though that it does apply to other episodes centering around the main character going through obstacles when it comes to other characters, it doesn't change the fact that Lynn, at the same time being stronger, doesn't change the fact that she doesn't learn much whatsoever, even throughout this entire episode. And believe me, we're gonna get to that soon. Let's get into the character Blanca, who is La Tormenta. To tell you the truth, for how she doesn't do much other than showing her athletic abilities, to be truthfully real with you, if she and Lynn were in the ring together, I can guarantee you that she would have beaten Lynn, because to tell you the truth, despite Lynn being stronger, at the same time, it kind of shows that with her wrestling outfit on, she is honestly unstoppable and mostly a fan favorite when it comes to Mexican wrestling, and I can guarantee you that if Lynn manages to defeat her in Great Lake City, then I can guarantee you that she will have gotten more heat, considering that she's gonna be in the city in comparison to Royal Woods, which is a smaller location in comparison to Great Lake City. Also, for how this episode is making a big deal when it comes to maxes, I can guarantee that if Lynn were forced to wear a max, then to tell you the truth, she wouldn't feel what Bianca would feel when it comes to wrestling techniques and style when it comes to Mexican culture. Granted, I understand that the Lau family don't need to experience Mexican culture in comparison to Ryan and her family, but to tell you the truth, for how that this episode is showcasing of how that the max is really important, believe me, it really feels like that this episode understands wrestling a little bit more than the Loud House episode. Just because it has Mexican culture involving wrestling doesn't automatically mean that the Loud House episode is worse by any means. It's mainly the writing that really drags the episode down. You know, just seeing Ryan and Sancho facing each other for the max, that Sancho had the max all along, it feels awkward, but at the same time, it actually makes sense the more I think about it. Let me just say this for a fact that even though that the fight between Ryan and Sancho is underwhelming, at the same time, it still makes sense in the context of the storytelling in the episode. Believe me, when this had better storytelling in comparison to the Loud House episode, it still makes me question onto why people say that the Casagrandes is bad all because of poor ratings. Cable isn't the same as it was back then, and to tell you the truth, if you don't even understand how this show manages to get more money, especially the fact that it's getting a movie of its own, then you clearly don't even know anything of how that these shows are getting money nowadays. Honestly, even if it may be for different reasons of bad elements from the Casagrandes that I'm familiar with, at the same time, this episode somewhat overweighs the negatives, mainly the fact that it actually knows how to capitalize Mexican culture. And to tell you the truth, even though that there are different opinions from others who do not like this show, at the very least, this isn't even one of the worst things when it comes to the Loud House, especially nowadays. Honestly, if it would have been a lot more better when it comes to how it was executed, when it comes to handling its characters, then I would probably say that it would have been on the same levels as the Loud House. But at the same time, my opinions have been flip-flopping, whether if it was a good idea or a bad idea when it comes to that this show would have done this instead of that. Believe me, there are still a few elements I would discuss centering around that, but my point is that just because there are a few bad things from this show, that doesn't automatically mean that it's a bad idea to do a spin-off in the first place. Let's get into the ending of the Loud House episode. Well, Lynn goes to her final match that it's gonna be televised, and Bella Big Bucks told her that she's gonna be the most terrifying villain, well not really terrifying, but the most hated villain all over the world. And after going through so much booing and having a difficult time at school and other places, Lynn doesn't want to be the villain anymore. Honestly, if people are going to describe this as a good thing, since that Lynn is experiencing hate right in front of her in comparison to her Loud siblings from the Season 2 episode, keep in mind again, Lynn is probably not going to learn much, and to tell you the truth, her match against her opponent towards the end and the ending really makes this entire episode feel meaningless, knowing forward that Lynn isn't going to learn whatsoever. And to tell you the truth, with the other characters doing the same thing when it comes to learning the mistakes despite doing them repeatedly, it just makes me feel like that this message of people ganging up on you because you're a terrible person when it comes to the event that you attended by doing the things that the fans don't want to see really doesn't make me convinced that it's honestly a moral that actually is established correctly, because to tell you the truth, Lynn is mostly emotionless in comparison to the other characters that have emotions, and as far as I'm concerned, that's honestly the biggest problem that I have when it comes to Lynn's character. Like, she doesn't need to be completely emotional, but at the same time, for how she is feeling remorseful for the stuff that she's going through, at the same time, she still isn't going to learn after this episode. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. So when it comes to her match against Santa Claus, who is the wrestler that people enjoy the most, which for me personally, I will find this clever if the wrestling match was unique, but at the same time it wasn't. So Lynn's objective is to beat herself up in order to have Santa win by forfeit. In all honesty, judging of how that this episode is executed, I didn't really find this climax any good, because to tell you the truth, knowing forward that Lynn is strong and really difficult to maintain, unless if it's Bianca when it comes to her wrestling gear, it really feels like that this entire match itself is difficult to take itself seriously, even in the cartoon. Despite not happening in WWE or in AEW or in TNA, the ending of it all is really anticlimactic, where Lynn told Bella Big Bucks that she's done being hated while throwing her tire at Bella Big Bucks. And that's how the episode ends. Trust me when I say this, is that for how less impactful this ending is without Lincoln and Lenny showing support towards Lynn, at the same time, with it being a Lynn-centered episode, at the very least, it doesn't have to be a 100% Lynn-centered focused episode, because for how that she's carrying this episode, and the fact that her development is what really makes it difficult for me to find any sympathy towards her, it really shows that Lincoln and Lenny should have been supporters towards Lynn, similar to Ryan and Sid, who are trying to right the wrong that they did from saving face. Even though that Blanca is a wrestler that doesn't get the exact same screen time as how Lincoln and Lenny had in the Loud House episode. And to tell you the truth, the bit while Lynn wears Lincoln's outfit, and the fact that she said, "Who will wear these?" Honestly, if this is the closest insult that Lincoln would have gotten from Lynn, since that she didn't say stinking in the entire runtime of this episode, keep in mind, Lori wore the same outfit from cover girls, and to tell you the truth, it kind of makes the joke difficult to take itself seriously. All the while that with fan art being made from it, believe me when I say this, I'm pretty sure some of you guys who made fan art of it probably didn't see cover girls. To be real with you guys, if Lincoln was a main character in this episode but being a supportive towards Lynn, I can guarantee you that they will probably have things being thrown at Lincoln, or probably get attacked by the other wrestlers, and the only punishment that was undeserved that he got was having a fan throw nachos at his face, all the while Lynn told him that who would wear these. In all honesty, if this is literally the only way that Lynn gets punishment for being rude towards Lincoln by this one line, that's honestly the same equivalent of having the Loud Sisters force Lincoln to wear toilet paper after giving them bad luck, even though that he didn't mean to give them bad luck when it comes to the Wayne, mainly from Biz Auditorium. In conclusion, saving face from the Casagrandes is the superior wrestling episode over the Loud House episode. Honestly, if this is mainly a way of not improving Lynn whatsoever due to the fact that they pretty much given up on her character, then it's honestly a shame. And granted, I still need to watch the other episodes that she's in, mainly the sponsors episode, but keep in mind, if that episode was much more better than the wrestling episode, then it's really saying something that they can't be able to make every single character good in every single episode. But believe me, when it comes to the bad episodes, I'm pretty sure that there at least needs to be one bad episode, regardless of what the fan base feels when it comes to what the reaction that they're going to give, which Nickelodeon isn't going to bother whatsoever. Take my advice, watch the Casagrandes episode after watching the Sin Cara vs. Sin Cara rivalry. Believe me, you will understand more of this episode than the Loud Test episode, because believe me when I say this, if you're focusing on the Loud Test episode when it comes to wrestling, you're gonna miss the character development of Lynn. Believe me, just because Lynn have her fans doesn't automatically mean that her episode involving wrestling is a pass, because as far as I'm concerned, it should have been more developed when it comes to the writing. I'm giving the Loud Test episode a 5 out of 10, while the Casagrandes episode gets an 8 out of 10.